Okay, since it's 9:30 CET, welcome to good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to day 3 of the annual meeting of the Alliance for Child Protection and Humanitarian Action. And we have another, as you could hear from my Cheng, another exciting day ahead of us. Okay, very good. Continue to put in your words so we can capture that. Great to see already so many of you joining us this morning or this afternoon or your evening. Um, and let me introduce the focus of this session. So in this session, we will discuss what are the specific risks to children and their protection and how we can address them. This is an area that requires more focus and investment in child protection and humanitarian action. Our speakers will take us through research findings and program examples, focusing on specific risks and how prevention approaches can reduce harmful outcomes for children and support their well-being. Now, to warm us up, there will be a quick word cloud, which you can find the link in the chat. So we have two questions. The first one is, who can be, according to you, the key actors to prevent violence against children? And as you know, violence against children is one of the key areas in the strategy of the Alliance. So who can be key actors to prevent violence against children? Traditional and religious communities, family, yes, governments, which have an obligation as they have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the international community, yes, we also have a responsibility, children and youth themselves, parents, excellent, continue to put in 33 answers. We're almost, everyone is responding, excellent. So as you can see here, family is one of the entities, that's one of the key actors that we see as the key actors to prevent violence against children. And communities, parents, excellent. We'll move to the next question. And the next question is, we would like you to complete the sentence. Children feel safe when, please complete that sentence. When they're protected, when they're loved, when they're seen. When they have full access to services, when they're listened to. Excellent. When they feel valued. When they're given dignity and respect. When they are seen. When they realize it is safe. Excellent. Thank you for continue to engage. Now let's start with our first session. But before going into that, if you have any thoughts, reflections, or questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. We will use that to pick up the questions, and we'll get back to those at the end of towards the end of the session. So without further ado, we are pleased to welcome Loveness Mutsuru, who is the Programs and Research Associate at the Rosaria Memorial Trust in Zimbabwe. And she will take us to through the first session. That will be about the way forward, a roadmap to end child marriage in Eastern Africa and within humanitarian crisis. Loveness, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us today. And welcome to our Way Forward, a roadmap to end child marriage and within humanitarian crisis. We would like to thank you so much for joining us today. Preventing, protecting, and response to child marriage. So firstly, I would like to invite my who will be sharing with you today a study that on the topic. Welcome, Katrina. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Loveness, and thank you, Ron. Good morning. I'm going to pass over to Julie for a short video before we go into the rest of our slides in this session. Julie, can I pass over to you to start the video for the session?
For too long, women and girls have been forced into marriages that put their well-being and often their very lives at risk. Child marriage is pervasive and happens in countries around the world and tends to increase during conflicts and displacement. In partnership with King's College London and the Rosaria Memorial Trust, WRC embarked on a joint programme to look closely at the causes of child marriage and the solutions.
One of the challenges was actually telling the story that child marriage is abuse and shifting the language from calling it a marriage. It's rape and it's a crime. We cannot achieve the goal of ending child marriage unless we have the capacity to understand the complexity of the issue. So partnerships and resources relating to research is very important.
I was a child marriage survivor myself, and I realized that it was not a good environment for anyone else to be engaged in. All these researches help us to understand what kind of resources are needed, what kind of relationships are needed to make sure that we respond to child marriage in an effective way.
Evidence provides authenticity. Having authentic information of the stories of girls in DRC, in South Sudan, so that we are not using our own perceptions and assumptions, but we are very rooted in the reality.
We have found that it's very important to have a cultural base in implementing or responding to child marriage.
The critical sustaining intervention and partnership that is needed is collaboration with the local organizations. The Women's Refugee Commission is supporting us to mobilize and engage with women's rights and feminist organizations in East Africa. The local organizations will sustain rebuilding lives in recovery, including for the girls who have experienced child marriage.
Thank you so much, Julie. So welcome, everyone. Welcome this morning. You heard from my colleague, Loveness Mutsuru, a bit earlier, and my name is Katrina Kiss, and I'm a graduate teaching fellow and research assistant at King's College London, and we are really pleased that you are joining us this morning for this session. Next slide, please. So the work and the research we'll be drawing on for this session is from a 2-year initiative that was in partnership with Women's Refugee Commission, King's College London, and Rosaria Memorial Trust. The research we have done has contributed to this project through facilitating a comprehensive and equitable engagement with feminist and women-led actors to identify shared priorities or gaps in the prevention and the response to child marriage in East Africa. And we did this using a Delphi methodology, which seeks consensus in relation to 3 areas. So you can see on the slide, the first one is what is essential for child marriage programming to be successful, and we have termed these enablers. The second is what prevents child marriage programming from being successful, and we've labeled this barriers. And the last one is what are the enablers and barriers to collaborative working across sectors and across the humanitarian development nexus. Next slide, please. So the study involved a process of engagement and re-engagement with a group of about 80 actors across East Africa whose work is women-led or informed by feminist thinking. The research followed a multi-stage participatory action research process, as illustrated, you'll see here on this flow diagram figure. So key stages throughout the process included initial qualitative workshops and then 3 rounds of a Delphi survey. Each survey stage informed the development of the next survey round, and it also highlighted areas of clear consensus. Through this methodology, the research process itself became somewhat of a facilitator, really, for building participant engagement and momentum for developing this agenda for action, which we'll speak about in just a little bit. So the research elicited several key themes, such as education, justice, awareness raising, community engagement and program design and implementation, and collaborative working. The study and the wider project supported the foundation for the creation of a new feminist vision and roadmap for ending child marriage in East Africa, which was developed by consortium members as well as the initiative partners. The roadmap outlines a 5-year plan to expedite process in Eastern Africa towards the elimination of child marriage, with the goal of achieving 5 key target outcomes by 2027. My colleague Loveness will consider the roadmap further at a later point in our session. But within the research, participants agreed on several key components that they believe are essential for transforming gender norms and preventing child marriage. Moreover, they emphasize the needs and the challenges that they face every day as grassroots feminist actors working in this space, and how the nature of collaboration directly impacts on their work to prevent child marriage in this region. Loveness will further present on a few key points of the research findings in relation to prevention and how collaboration is really key for preventing child marriage. I'm going to pass over to you, Loveness, for the next few slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Next slide, please. So, of the participants that we engaged at the onset agreed that multi-sector coordination and collaboration for prevention, for preventing child marriage and transforming gender norms. And we also found that 100% agreed on the enablers tool for preventing child marriage, being empowering girls and essential approaches for working with and meeting the needs of the already married girls must also include a multi-sectoral and multi-organizational approach to address some of the issues cited, which included action, which included education, prevention, and response to GBV, and hence an integrated response that brings together a different needs of married girls. The other also found were strengthening systems of accountability and using a gender transformative approach. Next slide, please. So we found that collaboration and joint working and working across sectors in the nexus is effective for prevention. 100% of our study participants it helps in a collective voice, ensuring justice by implementing and developing child marriage laws and as a collective. And some of the actions that taking out to engage with grassroots organizations and supporting them the essential funding. Funding must be equally and evenly distributed across sectors are engaging with girls and married girls particularly. Communications also, communication being a key enabler to collaboration. The Standard Grassroots organizations said that sharing experiences and knowledge ensures that there is no gap in information about the communities they work in. And we also found out that efforts must be made to alleviate power imbalances and between grassroots and it's important to consider mechanisms that facilitate inclusion of grassroots organizations, since they actually may have fewer resources, might have influence or tools for communication we take for granted. There is also the need to amplify girls' voices in collective spaces. So on this note, and moving forward with our session, we are now requesting you to join breakout rooms where you are being requested to address the question, what actions can be taken to engage with feminist actors to prevent child marriage during humanitarian crisis in contexts you work in? What actions can be taken to better engage with feminist actors to prevent child marriage during a humanitarian crisis context? During these breakout sessions, we would want to invite you to take your points. The link is being shared in the chat, and we would want to see that we have facilitators who will be writing your contributions on the Jamboard facilitate a quick flow of the Jamboard link is being shared in the chat, and we will be meeting you back in 5 minutes. So welcome back from your discussions. I hope we all had wonderful discussions in the breakout sessions. And whilst we were actually looking at what actions can be taken, to better engage with feminist grassroots actors to prevent child marriage during humanitarian crisis in the context that you all work from, we were getting quite good responses, and we also had that through engaging with grassroots actors, there can be a better understanding why through engaging with grassroots actors, we can better understand why families encourage child marriage and get better address the root causes. So I'm getting the sense that there is need for engagement with the grassroots organizations and need to build. Also, another point coming out that there is need to build capacity of grassroots organizations, and more of these issues, including context of grassroots access in the referral pathways. And I'm really glad that we actually pointed out some of these issues, and ensuring grassroots actors are included in collaboration mechanisms. These are some of the responses that we were getting from the breakout sessions. And I would also want to just share that we developed a feminist vision for ending child marriage in East Africa as a consortium of Rosario Memorial Trust, Women's Refugee Commission, and King's College London, and we developed a feminist vision for ending child marriage in East Africa, which outlines about 5 outcomes, which are actions to engage feminist grassroots actors to prevent child marriage. I would like to just share that with our first outcome, that we would want to see feminist and women's rights actors being well-trained, well-resourced, and we actually found out that even some of the responses that were mentioned during the breakout sessions was actually capacitating these grassroots actors and even advocating for them to be well resourced. And our vision was also, our outcome is also to well position them to transform practice and policies that drive humanitarian preparedness and response through local to regional spaces. And we also are advocating for an intergovernmental mechanism that governs disaster prevention and response to be strengthened to improve functioning and coordination of national systems, which are critical for women and the girls. And this may include social protection or even in health. Many efforts in programming, I should say, and policy implementation for response and prevention of girls and women, be it in education or justice, so rather on issues that affect women and girls, have been derailed due to the natural disasters like even COVID-19 or the wars in our countries. And therefore, we need to have a preparedness strategy which strengthen technical support and first responders, and the need for a development of guidance on collaboration to support better linkages. So thank you so much for participating in the breakout rooms. I would like to invite Katrina now for our closing session. Katrina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Loveness. And thank you all for those wonderful contributions to the Jamboard. And we hope to engage with you later, maybe over the chat. So before we close this session, just going to move to our thank you slide at the very end. On behalf of our colleagues at King's College London, Rosario Memorial Trust, and the Women's Refugee Commission, I would like to say thank you so much for joining us today and for your engagement with our work. And also many thanks to our session facilitator, Ron, our CPHA colleagues who have been absolutely brilliant planning this session, and other speakers who will be presenting just shortly. It's really a pleasure to share this work during the Alliance's annual meeting, and we are very grateful for the invitation. If you would like to know more about the initiative, the research, and the project, you can visit the link on the current slide, or our producer has also put in, you'll see in the chat, a link where you can access more information. You can also download several research briefings that are really just short 1 or 2 pages, an overall project brief, a methodology brief. There's lots of wonderful resources there. And also you can access the roadmap for action that we had spoken about in this session. Please feel free to contact us at our email addresses, which are also in the chat, and you can get in touch with any of the project partners for more information. Thank you so much, and back over to you, Ron.
Thanks very much, Loveness and Katrina. Very exciting presentation. It shows again the importance of research in getting to the root causes and understand the complexity of child marriage. Very interesting also to see your feminist grassroots approach and working really with women's actors at community level, and you're finding as well that the importance of collaboration and working across sectors as a key to prevent child marriage and transform gender norms. So thanks very much for that. We will now move to Monica for the second session. Monica Bandera is the head of research, the Regional Psychosocial Support Initiative, and she will be talking about suicide ideation of adolescents in sub-Saharan Africa. Monica, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to share some of the results we have on this interesting piece of work that we have done, looking at suicidal ideation in sub-Saharan Africa. REPSI, or the Regional Initiative for Psychosocial Support, is working in sub-Saharan, Eastern Southern Africa over the past 2 decades, with a real focus on improving psychosocial well-being of vulnerable groups, especially adolescents. REPSI really aims to create innovative mental health and psychosocial support interventions to transform policy and practice for girls, boys, and youth in Africa to really reach their full potential, with the overall vision being that all girls and boys and youth enjoy psychosocial and mental well-being. I want to just start off this presentation, which focuses on suicidal ideation and its prevention, with a poll. I'd like to invite you to answer the following question. Through your work, have you noticed a recent increase in suicidal ideation amongst adolescents or children? Please take some time to answer the poll, and we will come back to the results of this in a few minutes. So what do we know about suicide from literature? We know that it is the second leading cause of deaths globally for people aged 10 to 24. And of interest is that the Global South-Based Student Health Survey, which was conducted with over 200,000 adolescents in 59 low and middle income countries, found that suicidal thoughts were the highest in Africa, and they were between 20 to 25% of adolescents reported some level of suicidal ideation or planning. Within this context, we know that there are few resources dedicated to assisting people with suicidal behavior, and there are very high levels of stigma surrounding both mental health and suicide, as well as inadequate reporting systems. And this may lead to the fact that true rates of suicidal behaviors are probably underestimated in our context. When we talk about suicidal ideation in this presentation, we're really referring to having thoughts or feelings related to ending one's own life. Existing literature highlights several factors that contribute to high suicidal ideation in Africa. And those risk factors include HIV, the high level of prevalence of HIV amongst adolescents, and associated factors such as stigma, treatment side effects, and unsuppressed viral load, which have also been associated with depression and suicidal ideation. And this is particularly true for behaviorally infected as opposed to perinatally infected adolescents. Of really great interest to me is that in qualitative interviews, one researcher found that some adolescents living with HIV express slow suicide through non-adherence to treatment. Whilst research has identified the prevalence of suicidal ideation and planning and attempts to be higher in girls compared to boys, there is also evidence that deaths caused by suicide are higher in males. Some literature also points to the fact that older adolescents from 15 to 17 years of age compared to younger adolescents of 13 to 14 years have also higher prevalence of suicidal ideation, planning, and attempts. Beyond these factors, other factors that we know are linked to both increase or risk of depression and suicidal ideation include things such as poverty, exposure to any kind of violence or abuse, hunger and food insecurity, not feeling safe at home or in the community, early and unintended pregnancy, child marriage, bullying or victimization, and substance misuse, all of which we know are quite prevalent in the context in which we work. What are some of the predictive factors that we know from literature associated with suicidal ideation for African adolescents? Obviously, despite the many challenges faced during this period, adolescents also show remarkable resilience. And some of the protective factors against suicidal ideation include social support, positive relationships, and this could be with parents, families, and peers, positive parenting, including open and honest communication, caregiver stability, so things like staying with the same caregiver for more than 10 years, improved health, having dreams for the future, knowing one's HIV status, and safety, which includes being less exposed to violence as well as physical punishment, social support, and being in school. So I want to pull up our poll results. Where did they disappear to? Oh, here we go. So the responses that we have, it looks like 69% of you have responded yes to the question, have you noticed any signs of increase in suicide or suicidal ideation amongst adolescent boys and girls? So quite a high level of people indicating that this is becoming a more concerning trend, and it does definitely reflect the results that we're finding through our work with adolescents. So this presentation really is looking at the results from a larger baseline study with adolescents that were engaging in interventions that REFSI was running throughout sub-Saharan Africa. And what we wanted to do is we picked up that it seemed that suicidal ideation was a bit high. And so we really wanted to analyze this data further to explore both the prevalence of and the risk factors for suicidal ideation. This means that the study has several limitations, and I just want to make those quite clear because they're important to know. Obviously, respondents were not randomly selected, which means we cannot generalize these findings in any way. They're not representative of a larger population. And then also in the different countries in which we collected this data, we had different focus areas or thematic areas that were being implemented. And so there was some difference in the samples for each country, such as age or sex. We also know that we use the PHQ-9, and we know that self-report measures like that are also susceptible to responder bias. And due to the nature of suicide, the willingness of participants really to respond to these items may also have affected the results. And of course, one of the biggest limitations is that really we based this suicidal ideation to responses to one question in the PHQ, which asked about thoughts of suicide in the previous 2 weeks. And one of the aspects that I really feel is limiting our findings is the lack of qualitative data. It really limits the understanding of the nuances involved with suicidal ideation amongst this group. But despite these limitations, we really feel that this data provides important information about the experiences of adolescents in relation to suicidal ideation amongst a group for which we have very limited information. So what did we find?
We identified the risk and predictive factors from 2,000 responses across 11 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. This was done using a mental health assessment, which has a 9-item patient health questionnaire. Results showed the baseline prevalence for the following countries. As illustrated, Zimbabwe recorded the highest prevalence rate at 24%, while Uganda recorded the lowest at 1%. Overall, about 21% of adolescents had thought that they would be better off dead or hurting themselves, an average of 1 in 5 young people. Suicidal ideation is associated with reduced psychosocial well-being. The following are risk factors for suicidal ideation. Suicide can be prevented.
So we'd like to invite you now to join a breakout room and really just think through, in your experience and in what you know, what are some of the preventative interventions that could be put in place and that would be most appropriate to prevent adolescent suicide within your context? So I invite you, we can get the breakout room started now, and I invite you please to participate and add your thoughts. We will come back and discuss these when we come back, so please take notes, and we'll discuss them once we join. So I just want to take you through what kind of our research picked up as some of the things that we need to support in order to prevent suicidal ideation amongst adolescents in our context. And then once I go through mine, I'll open up the floor to hear from each of the different groups, any additional ones that aren't covered in our thoughts and recommendations that could be something important to think through around suicidal prevention of suicidal ideation. So obviously for us, one of the most important one is really improving social connectedness. We understand that that was a predictive factor amongst our for our research, that having that improved relationships with and social connectedness is especially important amongst older adolescents, but keeping in mind that older adolescents also, their peer relationships can sometimes be damaging. So it's really thinking about positive social connectedness and relationships amongst peers. It is clear that parenting and caregiving and positive parenting and caregiving is really important as a protective factor, and developing those close relationships even into older adolescents, that relationship between the parent caregiver and the child remains key to as a preventative factor. But work needs to be done in enhancing those relationships and enhancing open communication and caregiving, positive caregiving relationships. Obviously, we need to look at how to promote healthy coping mechanisms amongst adolescents to determine what are the other ways in which they may be able to cope with their emotions, cope with their feelings, be able to communicate those feelings in safe spaces, and having those safe spaces available to them would be really important to look at. Being in school was a clear safety protective factor against adolescent suicide within our sample. And so schools or at least being in school seems to be a protective factor and something that should be encouraged. So anyone that was out of school was at a much higher risk for suicidal ideation and action. So I think anything we can do to ensure that children are in school and that they stay in school would be very important. Early and unintended pregnancies or unplanned pregnancies was a definite risk factor. Those that had experienced early and unintended pregnancies were at a much higher risk, significantly higher risks for suicidal ideation. And that, I mean, the previous speakers spoke so wonderfully about this issue. We do need to protect young girls and ensure that they do not because it is a risk factor, both physically, but also their well-being. Thanks, Ron. And then obviously facilitating access to cover basic needs. So we found that, not having access to food, for example, and taps and water and electricity were risk factors for adolescents. There seemed to be a higher issue around older adolescents and girls, and so focusing more on that group would be important. And then linked to the early and unintended pregnancies, we also have the prevention of forced or child marriage. So we have, I think, 1 minute left. I would like to invite anyone that that has anything else to contribute other than these from your breakout rooms. You could please share them now. And just to say thank you so much for the opportunity to present on this research.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
if you have anything that wasn't, so that's is in your group, was in your groups, but has not been mentioned here. Yeah, see, it's great. Put it in the chat as well. So we'll continue with the session. Any closing remarks, Monica?
No, I just want to say thank you so much to the Alliance and to my fellow speakers and all the team behind the process of organizing the event, especially Manami as well for all her efforts in the background to make sure we all got our acts together. Really appreciate everyone that came and joined us, and really appreciate all of you that are working to protect children and ensure that they are able to live free and healthy lives.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. Thanks for your presentation. And I think again it shows the importance of having data, doing this quantitative research. But as you said as well, to ensure that we also need to, based on the data that we have right now, look at more sort of the qualitative data, which is largely lacking. Very impressive to see you've covered 11 countries and looked at both sort of the prevalence and the risk factors. Also interesting to see the link with the previous presentation on child marriage as a prevention action, and the coming presentation that will also be about child marriage. So without further ado, we'll move to the final presentation session that will be presented by Duretti Haji, who's the head of programs of the Den Church Aid, and she will be talking about Engage as a tool to reduce child marriage and promote gender equality. And just before I forget, if you have any questions and we haven't seen them yet in the chat, please feel free to post them there. We do have a bit of time at the end to go back to those questions. And also, if you have anything to add from your breakout groups on Monica's session, please feel free and put that in the chat. Thanks, Monica, and over to Duretti for your part. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron, for the introduction. Mine is talking about the actual field practice on how we can mitigate child marriage and improve gender equality, and that is about Engage Toolkit. Before talking about Engage, I just want to say that there has been a very good collaboration between UNICEF and DCA for the last 5 years, and specifically we have been implementing one big project that is entitled as Right-Based and Gender-Responsive Services to Address Gender-Based Violence in Rohingya Camps and Host Communities. And this is where we introduced the Engage tool, as we have specifically noticed that there is a high child marriage in the camp. So next, please. Let's take just 2 minutes here to talk about drivers of child marriage in humanitarian crisis. So I will just ask audience to take part in sharing their thoughts and what they understand about child marriage and how it is even gets severe in humanitarian crisis. So if you can just chat, put your thoughts here. Yes. Okay. Just go. Okay. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I think many of you has mentioned so many interesting points, but in summary, 2-3 things they are coming repeatedly. One is that poverty. The second one is that is considered as a safety and security method. And the third one is, I think, ignorance or lack of awareness. So we can see, like, basically it revolves around these 3 major areas that causes. Of course, in most cases in humanitarian crisis, people tend to get safety and security for their girls, and they think that marriage is one of the areas that they can take it as a safety and security for their young ones. So just to give you a little idea about the context where we have introduced the Engage tool, and to give you an idea that it is in the refugee context of Bangladesh in Cox's Bazar. Since 2017, as you are all aware, that there was a high refugee influx coming to Bangladesh, and they are hosted in Cox's Bazar in 33 camps. Around 954,000 refugees are officially registered. The camp situation, it is extremely congested, and the camps pose serious security and wellness and well-being risks, particularly for children and girls. The risk in this area, the risk includes violence, sexual harassment, rape, trafficking, and also child marriage. These are the things that we have observed happening repeatedly. Next. So what is Engage and how it works? So this is where I want to take you through the Engage. First is just Engage is a short form for the term Enhancing Girls Agency for Equality. Okay. And it works in holistic approach targeting all levels of socio-ecological model. The activities of Engage challenges norms and beliefs that affect the life of the girl child. The main goal of Engage is to prevent, mitigate, and respond to child early and forced marriage. Next slide. So when we say holistic Engage, it has 2 dimensions. One dimension is specifically working into the community level, where it engages the family, it engages teachers, it engages religious leaders, and then the community at large. With all those outreach services, we engage everyone in different level. Like, for example, for caregivers, we talk about the family, the mothers and the fathers, and we address them separately, like the male caregivers, female caregivers, and we address them through continuous sessions covering the different topics. So we take them throughout the year. For teachers, we provide training, and specifically because this is like where many of the children, they can get information within the school. So this is like increasing the reach of the different required message to reach to children. Religious leaders, we specifically engage religious leaders as they are very influential within the community. How we do it is that we start training them, and then we equip them with the different required resources, so they reach out to the community in different forums they have, especially during prayer times or other community gathering. And most of the time they have like the platform or the opportunity to speak to the community and to influence the community. So this is how we engage them, the religious leaders. And then we also have community dialogue. This is like where community come together and continuously talk about the issues. So once we talk about and raising the awareness and engaging all these community members, the second side or the other side of the holistic approach of Engage is that providing the service. So in the providing service, we look into case management, we consider psychosocial support provision, we consider referral services, like whatever service is needed and that we as a DCA are not able to provide, then we refer them out to other service providers. And then we also have life skill sessions where this is specifically focusing on girls, and this is like giving them life skill training, especially on positive coping mechanisms. Yes, including boys. Next slide, please. So as we pilot out Engage, we have tested it in 6 camps and 2 host communities. We engaged around 480 adolescent boys and 480 adolescent girls. We engaged 960 caregivers and 96 religious leaders. So this is like a 1-year pilot so far. Like we started applying Engage in 2022. And in 2022, this is the number of people who were engaged in the utilization of Engage 2. And as a result, of course, we have seen a very much remarkable outcome. Next slide, please. And here I would like to share a video where one of our religious leader took, after taking part in Engage, how he and his family are influenced and how he has become a promoter within the community. I hope this is not showing. Yeah.
আর গরম মধ্যে দোয়া মাইয়া আছে আতু উকো বড় মাইয়া এবার আর ডিসি এ শান্তি হানাত যাইরে হিবালে ইনটু কেসু শিকিয়রা ইয়ার বুতরে হক বার গরিয়রা আর মাইয়া বর কি উকিল ক্লাসি বিহার প্রস্তাব লইলা বলি তো মাইয়া নিজে বাজ হই দে আই আজ 18 বছর ন ফুরাই আই এখন কি বিয়া করিবার কিন্তু কি নাই আই রাজি নাই যেদিন পর্যন্ত আই 19 18 ন ফুরাই ধরে এতদিনের ভিতরে আই বিয়া করতে Angera আর মাইয়া কি দিয়ে জব মসজিদের মধ্যে ইন্ডিয়া শুট করাইলে মানে বিয়াকে দল বলকর মানে যকুন দল বুড়াই দল আলেম দল তারপরে হচ্ছে দল হইনে দল এটা বগুলো হইলে ইন্ডিলা তোরা তারা বুড়া হালে সড় মাইয়া বন্ধরে বিয়া দিবলা বলি তোরা একটু রাজি নই তারপর যেতাম মধ্যে মারা যাইতে পারে অথবা এবার শরীরের মধ্যে আঘাত আসতে পারে অথবা কিডনির মধ্যে আঘাত আসতে পারে এই কারণে সড় হালে বিয়াদন কি বালানো ইয়ান কি যেতাম 18 বছর ফুরাইব হ্যাঁ তোমাদের মাইয়া পরে কি বিয়াদন ইয়ান কি আছে শরীয়ত তো আছে এবং উরুফত আছে সারা দুনিয়ার মাঝে
Okay. So let's talk about results. So in this 1 year, as we rolled out Engage, the things that we have observed as changes within the community, this is actually based on our internal pre-test and post-test results. So what we have seen is that there is a 32% increase in awareness with regard to early marriage and appropriate age of marriage. This is among the adolescent girls. So they are quite aware that they have this, they have grasped the idea of what appropriate age of marriage is. We have observed sorry, just a moment. Yeah, so we have also observed 21% increase in girls' participation in socioeconomic activities as a result of changed perception on girls' role. This is especially in our context in Cox's Bazar. where adolescent girls are not allowed to move out. We feel that this is a very big success, and if this continues, a lot will change. And then we also have seen 32% increase in acceptance and valuing of opinion forwarded by adolescent girls. The adolescents, actually, it is both boys and girls. And this is also like in a society where the opinion of children or the adolescent is not that much valued. So we feel that this is a big success within 1 year. And then we also have 21% increase in adolescents, boys and girls feel more valued. This is how they feel compared to the previous time. And then we have also seen a 26% increase in family response in cases of any violence outside or inside family. So this is some of the results, a very, very positive results that we have observed over a 1 year period. Next slide, please. So I will summarize about our Engage toolkit in just 3 points, because it is just 1 year, and also like we feel that there is a long way to go. But within this 1 year piloting phase of Engage, it's working well in humanitarian setting. So we also firmly believe that it can also work in non-humanitarian setting. It can be adopted and it can be used to influence different behaviors. We also believe that Engage can also be adopted to address any harmful practices as it applies a holistic approach. So given, I mean, in any context, like anyone who wants us to use Engage, they can make their assessment and make it adapt to their situation, and then they can apply Engage. So DC also firmly believe that the long-term application of Engage will have a higher impact. The fact it requires, this requires resource allocation, and we hope that there will be more interest from the donor community to provide support on this effort. We want to continue actually like using this approach not only to address child marriage and gender equality, but also in other areas where we feel that we can promote stability and I think economic improvement. So thank you very much. That's all from my side, and over to you, Ron.
Thank you very much, Duretti, and thanks for really being on time. So we still have a bit of time left for questions, and very interesting to hear how it challenges the norms and behavior, how you're looking at it from 2 dimensions and not just from a service provision dimension, but also really how to engage and outreach to communities. And it's very promising to see all the sort of the results from just 1 year of pilot testing in a humanitarian settings. And as you mentioned in your conclusions, that is a tool that is working in a humanitarian setting, which is obviously great because we need those type of tools in the settings that we work in. But it's also definitely a tool that works in any settings that's where you would like to address child marriage. Of course, contextualize it to wherever one works. But I was very, very impressed to see that particularly also there was an increase of opinions that were forwarded by adolescents with 32%. So that's very positive and promising finding. So we have some time for questions, as I mentioned. There was one question in the chat which I will translate into English by Adama. Thanks for sharing that, Adama. Your question was about child marriage as being taken as a child protection factor by the community. How could we change this mentality of the community around child marriage, and what are the effective tools that could be used. So we heard about Engage as one tool. We also have a question, an answer in the chat saying we should engage traditional leaders, informing them about the risk associated with child marriage, and in parallel engaging with religious leaders. Maybe Duretti, over to you in terms of your engagement with communities. What's more can you say about that in addition to your presentation, to the question how we engage with communities?
Yeah, I have my colleagues with me who are actually very much expert in the community engagement. So I will give it over to Shaheen.
Thank you. Just give me 1 minute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, please.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, it was not an easy thing to engage community, particularly the religious leaders and caregivers as well. So what we did, we tried to build rapport with them initially by visiting their home or where they are passing their leisure time. We went there to talk about our interventions, and then we invited them in our different activities like awareness sessions or training. And gradually, we try to engage them in different QV prevention and response intervention. And when we launched the Engage, in that time, we conducted a series of FGD with the different stakeholders. I mean, we conducted FGD with adolescents, boys and girls separately, as well as their caregivers and religious leaders. And we talked about their availability, their concern, their what safety security issue we need to concern, how we can maintain confidentiality, which space is safe for them. So that type of discussion we had initially, and then when the stakeholders are ready to work with us, then we form different groups with adolescents, boys and girls and their caregivers and also religious leaders. And I do recall when we initially, I mean, when we have started our intervention in 2018, that religious leader, they were, I mean, act as an opponent. I do recall that they announced in a meeting that, and they were resisting their women and girls not using our safe space. And then we realized that no, we need to involve ourselves to build a rapport with that particular groups, because they are the main influence in the community. The community people, mainly they listen to them. So gradually we try to improve our relationship with them, and then now they are very much active in that prevention and response intervention. I could say that when during the COVID, when we were absent when the humanitarian actors can't go there to provide direct support, in that time also they provided tremendous support to us. They linked survivor to us, they disseminated information to the community. So that's the way we made and we established a relationship with the different stakeholders. And also the male caregivers, they were also initially very much reluctant, and they were giving so many excuses that they have other things to do, they don't have enough time to discuss. But when we talked about the component, what is the benefit for them and for their adolescents, boys and girls, and then now they are eagerly engaging themselves in our, say, different sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaheen. Katrina, anything to add from your end on that, engaging with communities?
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you, colleagues from UNICEF, Duretti, and Kaji. Main focus of our study was really to understand what were the enablers and barriers to ensuring that child marriage programming was successful. So our respondents spoke quite a bit about what works well, what components in programming support them in doing their work, and what really are those barriers where they feel like there are major challenges that they cannot possibly overcome, and engaging communities was cited as a key enabler to ensuring that programs are successful. So engaging communities also from the very start of programming, so from the design through the implementation, through the evaluation, that they are really included meaningfully as well every step of the way, and not including them at later points in the programming where then it may be too late to identify, as Kaji was saying, about the security measures or possibly practical things like, are girls actually allowed to travel from their homes to the site of the programming? Do parents have any say over where those sites of programming are taking place within the community? And are there any concerns surrounding that? So that was absolutely one of our key themes and learnings that came through our research. We do have, if anyone was able to catch the link that was posted by Julie a little bit earlier, one of our research briefings, it's only about 2 pages, it's very short, it's directly linked to community engagement and the key findings that we found throughout our studies. So if anyone would like to refer to that, that piece is there on our website. But thank you for sharing those reflections. It really resonates, I think, with what our participants were saying in terms of engaging communities in East Africa.
Excellent. Thanks for that. I think that comprehensively answers the question. Monica, a question for you, and maybe it's a very obvious one, and maybe you don't have the answer to it either. I was very struck by the difference in prevalence between Zimbabwe 24% and Uganda at only 1%. Any thoughts on that? What sort of causes that's I mean, the high prevalence in Zimbabwe, although I understood from your later point that the prevalence is around 21%. So Zimbabwe is maybe the highest, but not that far higher than sort of the average. But Uganda is at 1%. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, thanks, Ron. It's a great question. So as I had pointed out, the work in different countries had different thematic focus areas, and the one in Zimbabwe was with adolescent mothers. So we know that was a higher risk. So and that's why the percentage of suicidal ideation was so much higher than other countries, because they were adolescent, or they are adolescent mothers. And then Uganda, I think it was a much younger group that we worked with. So that was lower in that sense. So there are quite a lot of country differences, and it's important to think about it contextually and think about it thematically in terms of who we spoke to and who we interviewed.
Okay, that makes sense. And did you see any, because we often read about, when we talk about COVID, that has increased also the mental well-being of particularly adolescents. Has that had any impact on your survey, on your baseline?
So it was interesting because we collected data just before COVID, and now we're collecting data again with a new group of adolescents, and we just recently and we've actually augmented our questions around suicidality because we are seeing an increase in this. The reports that we have concluded on, the one was also again in Zimbabwe with adolescent mothers, and there was a significant increase in those reporting suicidal ideation in this year compared to 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I think in this latest report, but please don't hold me to it, but if my memory is correct, it's around 38% had a serious thought of ending their lives in the previous month. So I think it is something that's really concerning, and that we need to take into account. We know that COVID had a negative impact on our adolescents, and we have seen that, because we also do pre and post tests, that the results were moderate in relation to previous research that we've done of pre and post. So we know that there has been an impact regarding COVID for sure. And then all the accompanying things like lack of access to many things that may be protective for adolescents especially.
Thank you, Monica. Unfortunately, we've reached 11 o'clock. CET. I would have loved to continue. I think I had a couple of more questions to ask, but I would really like to thank our speakers, Katrina and Loveness, Monica Duretti. Excellent presentations, very interesting to hear something practical about the tool that you're piloting, but also again the importance of research, working with communities, and looking also at the service provision side, looking at topics that are very relevant to young people and children and adolescents. So thanks very much for that. I would also like to thank our production team, and also a big thanks to Manami, who has been the silent force behind this session and making it work. So I will hand over to Manami as well, who will take you to the next small final part of this session. Manami, over to you.